And now it's time for Upshift, Downshift, our weekly look at climate news, where each week Jesse and I, who host the Shift Key podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, take a look at the climate news that caught our attention this week. If it's making us feel more upbeat about the energy transition, it's an upshift. If it's making us feel more downbeat, more pessimistic, it's a downshift. Jesse, as always, why don't you lead us off?
I will, although I do still think we need to get some sound effects in here. I have an upshift today. Yeah, exactly. Ding-a-ding-a-ding. I have an upshift today, which is a recent report on the first quarter sales of heat pumps in the United States market. We talk a lot about electrification as a key cornerstone of the energy transition, of course, and spent numerous episodes talking about electric vehicles, as we did in this week's episode. But I think we spent a lot less attention on the admittedly less sexy market for heat pumps. These are the key strategy for electrifying building heating and cooling, right? To basically take an air conditioner and make it reversible so it can both heat and cool your home. Does so much more efficiently in terms of the amount of heating you get per unit of electricity you put in than even the most efficient boilers, because as a heat pump, it's not creating or converting energy from one form to another. It's simply moving heat around, and that makes it extremely efficient. The coefficient of performance is the term used, but it's basically the efficiency is greater than 100%.
I still don't fully understand how this works.
Yeah, it doesn't violate any laws of physics, trust me on that one. But you end up with a device that's something like 200 to 400% efficient at taking electricity and converting it to heating or cooling in your homes. And if we're going to decarbonize the economy, we need to shift the vast majority of homes and buildings over to heat pumps. And so this data in from Momentum and the Building Decarbonization Coalition shows that we are indeed gaining market share for heat pumps, both for space heating and for water heating. Heat pumps can do both. Heat pump market share has been growing steadily and rebounded much more rapidly from a contraction seen in 2023 due to the inflationary cycle that we were just through and maybe are going into again, where fossil fuel furnace sales have only grown at about 5% from 2023 to 2024, basically are flatlined at this point, whereas heat pumps rebounded 14% year on year. We now sell nearly 1 million more units in the US of heat pumps than we do fossil furnaces. So they're now the majority of new heating and cooling equipment sold. Electric storage water heaters, that includes both heat pump water heaters and electric resistance water heaters, are also the majority of sales now, about 1 million more units sold of electric water heaters than gas water heaters as well. Same story there. From 2022 to 2024, gas storage water heater sales have been flat, where electric storage water heater sales have grown by 11% per year. So at least heading in the right direction. We got to get that number up much higher, right, if we're going to be on track for our deep decarbonization goals. But crossing over that 50% threshold is a key milestone, and seeing those lines start to diverge is exactly what you want to see in an upshift.
What could have been a big hurdle actually has just been cleared, which is like when you cross that big threshold and suddenly you're adding more water heaters and heat pumps than you are gas boilers. That you could imagine that being like, this is really intractable. We don't fully understand why. Maybe it takes more subsidies. But in fact, it's like, oh no, it just happened.
Yeah, I mean, we did enact subsidies in 2022 with the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's only a couple $1,000s per unit.
And there's state level supports.
Yeah, there are state level supports. I always say the Inflation Reduction Act put clean energy technologies on sale. Basically, it's like Black Friday deals. But if you look at the magnitude of incentives provided, the incentives for heat pumps outside of the state level rebates, which are limited in their scale, are much smaller than they are for other technologies where we're subsidizing more like 30 to 50% of the cost in some cases. And so it's interesting to see that, relatively low incentive maybe was all that was needed at the federal level. But I think you're right to key into that tipping point, because one of the things I think I keep hearing as a major impediment to electric heating is that if something breaks in your home, like it's cold out or it's hot out and your air conditioner or your furnace breaks, like you're going to want to fix that quickly, right? You're going to call up your technician or your plumber and you're going to get them to come out as soon as possible. And then basically the options are, what do they have on the back of the truck or in their distribution warehouse? You're not going to be doing extensive shopping of all of your alternatives. And if the majority of sales in key markets start to become electric, then what's more likely to be on the back of the truck is a heat pump and not a furnace. And so that can build on itself in a really important way. And I've been thinking of that as a key barrier because I think historically it has been, but maybe we are really hitting this tipping point where we're going to start to see that more. And of course, I don't think these sales are evenly distributed across the country. I think there's more data in the report about where, but that probably means that certain markets are well beyond that tipping point and majority, much more higher market penetration for electric heat pumps and space and water heating, whereas some are still on the other side of that tipping point and need a bit more of a push. Rob, what do you have for us this week?
Oh, I have a downshift, I'm afraid. I try to bring
gotta
an
balance it
upshift
out,
most
right?
weeks,
Yeah.
but I have a downshift this week. And not only do I have a downshift, I have a downshift which I've been reporting on. So one thing that's happening across the federal government right now, in addition to so many other stories, is that the Department of Government Efficiency is coming into cabinet level departments, in this case, the Department of Energy, and handing down quite aggressive reductions in force. So they're saying to department heads, you must eliminate this many positions and you should do everything you can to get rid of this many people. The political appointees who lead the Department of Energy, as well as longtime civil servants, have been going to their staff in the Department of Energy and encouraging folks to take this early severance deal. We'll put it in the show notes, but this has been something I've been reporting where federal government employees, the department comes to them and says, hey, in the future, we're going to lay a lot of people off. And your severance might be really bad when we do that. So what we want you to do is to take this deal where we're going to promise to pay you. You can resign this month and stop working in the near future. And then we're going to promise to pay you through September. This was initially advanced by Elon Musk, and now it has come back. And when it was first proposed by Elon in February, a lot of department employees were not sure whether they were going to take it because it wasn't sure that the federal government was actually going to pay people through September. But now most people in the government know someone who did take the deal, probably because they were planning early retirement. They are still getting paid, and a lot more people are taking the deal this time around. What's interesting is that the Department of Government Efficiency has these big plans to cut many key Department of Energy industrial policy offices. And the one I want to focus on today is the Loan Programs Office, which is the in-house bank for the Department of Energy, but also the in-house bank for the US government, especially for anything energy related. It has done a lot over the past 10 years to advance American decarbonization. The two most famous things it did was it gave a loan to Solyndra back in the Obama administration that attracted a lot of ire, but it also gave a loan to Tesla to build one of its first factories in Fremont, California, a loan that was completely central to Tesla's rise and its ability to become a major US automaker. LPO, or the Loan Programs Office, has also been, and this is where I think we get into something that's pretty interesting for the Trump administration. So the Trump administration wants to build a lot more nuclear. Nuclear has been an extremely important source of decarbonized US electricity. It's generated more zero carbon electricity in the US than wind and solar does. LPO has basically backed every single new nuclear project this century, except for one. LPO backed the Vogtle plant in Georgia, where we built 2 new nuclear reactors over the past 15 years. LPO gave a $12 billion loan to those reactors, including $3 billion from the past Trump administration. LPO has given a $1.5 billion loan guarantee to the Palisades nuclear plant in Michigan, which would be the first U.S. nuclear plant that has shut down that would turn back on. And LPO has also, it's been reported, it's considering a $1.6 billion loan to the second reactor at 3 Mile Island, which is considering turning back on, or there's a deal to turn it back on to power AI data centers. In fact, the only new nuclear project that LPO did not support since 2000 was Watts Bar, where we added a new reactor. But Watts Bar is owned by the Tennessee Valley Authority, and so it actually has federal financing support through another
already.
means. Yes, exactly. So if you want to build a new nuclear reactor, which the Trump administration does, you need federal financing support. The Department of Government Efficiency and the political leadership at the Energy Department, acting at the behest of DOGE, wants to cut the staff at LPO in half. In fact, they're encouraging as many staff as possible to take the buyout deal. And it looks like right now, we don't know how many of these applications have been accepted yet, but according to my reporting, more than half of LPO staff, or about half of LPO staff, have applied to take a buyout out of LPO. That's like crazy for 2 reasons. The first is LPO, although it's been criticized, I've criticized it for not issuing loans fast enough, actually issues a lot of loans much more efficiently than banks do. Like for number of employees, LPO is more efficient at generating loans than private banks. It takes a long time because there's a lot of paperwork, and I think we should look at reducing that. But number two, they're going to cut so deep at LPO that the office is barely going to be able to maintain its current portfolio of loans, much less issue new ones or ones that are currently under consideration. And that's just going to immediately shut down the Trump administration's ability to build new civil nuclear projects. A number of conservative energy groups, in addition to some abundance-oriented clean energy advocacy groups and some centrist environmental groups, wrote a letter to the Department of Energy basically being like, do you know what you're doing? If you gut LPO, you're going to completely gut your ability to follow through all these goals that you've set for this administration. You may even make energy prices go up because there's going to be continued more demand for energy and electricity, and you're not going to be able to finance the continued growth in supply. Right now, there's no report that the Trump administration has changed its tack. It seems like they're just going to go ahead and gut this office. And that is obviously extremely bad for America's ability to have an industrial policy, for America's ability to follow through on its adding more supply to the US energy economy, but it's also just bad for the Trump administration's own ability to meet their energy goals. What I guess it points to is that there is this fight happening across the Trump administration, which is that the Department of Government Efficiency is able to come in and set targets and make cabinet level departments do things that their political appointees who are actually in charge of them don't really want to make them do, because Doge seems to have more sway from the White House. They seem to have this higher level buy-in. But these Doge people don't always understand what they're trying to do.
Don't always? Do they ever?
Well, I mean, I think they, in some cases, they have a very ideological goal, right? And sometimes that goal is just completely get rid of the government. I think they're going to do that in some areas, okay. But in this one, it seems like they don't really understand at all what the financing ecosystem looks like. And it's going to totally kill the Trump administration's ability to meet its own policies for the rest of their term.
And I think in the context of automotive competitiveness as well, a big chunk of what the Loan Programs Office does is help the Advanced Technology Manufacturing Loan Program, which is used for retooling the American automotive supply chain to be competitive in a variety of ways. It invests across the board in American competitiveness in a whole set of emerging technologies. So if your strategy is American energy dominance, the last thing you want to do in the face of China and its massive state financing capacity, which is behind a lot of their successful deployment of new technology, is to gut one of the only U.S. capabilities to provide financing domestically, right? I mean, this is the one example.
Suddenly, we've stumbled backward into being engaged in this economic competition with China. Under Trump, first we put tariffs on everyone. Now we've taken tariffs off everyone, except we have a 10% tariff on the world. But we have these extremely eye-watering tariffs on China. At least we do on the day we're recording this. We've stumbled backward into this massive global economic competition with China, the most important trade war this century, during which the Trump administration's goal is to reindustrialize the U.S., to bring back manufacturing, their stated goal at least. And we know one of the reasons China has built its manufacturing megaplex is because it has massive amounts of government resources devoted to creating a state financing ecosystem. We don't have that in the US. There's been periodic bipartisan efforts to build one. The closest thing we do have is the Loan Programs Office at DOE, and Doge is coming in and completely gutting it and gutting it for the next few years too. Even if they were to reverse course, it will now take another few years, right? If they lay off half the office, it's going to take another few years to hire back everyone they need to hire and to build up the expertise and to build up the internal procedures to make loans happen. You can't spring up a bank overnight, right? And so they're just going to kill it.
And this is also, again, one of those sectors where, one of those offices where you need highly specialized knowledge. You need to understand how to put financing deals together and vet them. These are skills that are highly remunerated in the private sector, right? So the folks who are going into these jobs are doing it out of public service, and they can easily make more money in the private sector. And so if you create a hostile environment for them, they're going to leave. And that's exactly what they're doing. It's just the fundamental idea that the way to make the government more efficient is to cut staff is just completely boneheaded, especially in an example of a bank where they have a $400 billion loan portfolio. The fact that they have a couple hundred people on staff working to execute that giant portfolio, that's not the efficiency bottleneck. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of the cost of the program. I mean, I'm all for making LPO more efficient, but to do that, you probably need more and better people and better work practices, right? Better automation and digitization and everything else. Just cutting people makes it much less efficient and more likely to make mistakes. And it's just, I think it gives up the game, right? There's nothing about efficiency in what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing.
Well,
we'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. If you enjoyed this conversation, you should subscribe to Jesse and my podcast, Shift Key. You can find it on Apple. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on heatmap.news, wherever you get your podcasts. Our weekly show on decarbonization and the shift away from fossil fuels. Subscribe to Shift Key today.